Okay, so in the safety, health, and logistics section, we're going to be going over these items, anything from just a kind of an overview of Guatemala. That's cool to hear that a lot of you guys have some motivation for the program related to Guatemala. It's an amazing country, and for those of us that have been there, we're all really excited to go back. So that's awesome to know that you are um, interested, and we're going to kind of give a little bit of an overview as well as some of the other items logistically and health wise. So I like to be able to kind of start on the historical side. I'm a history teacher. I teach world history at Durango High School. So, kind of just a very short gist is that for millennia, Guatemala was a masterpiece of the great Mayan civilization. And like our indigenous neighbors here, while some people may feel that like that civilization is quote unquote died out, it's absolutely not the case. And like what you'll see is that the Mayan civilization is alive and thriving. And unfortunately, with the arrival of the Spanish conquistadors, as well as the catastrophic civil war that occurred, that was 36 years long, the main kind of victims of that whole conflict were the indigenous populations. So there's definitely been bumps in the road, like with many different civilizations, but one of my favorite parts of the program is to be able to kind of learn about the various different elements of the Mayan population that is thriving in Guatemala. So a small example is at the lake. There's like a bunch of different villages around the lake, and each village like speaks slightly different dialects of the of languages. So each kind of village a lot of times will have like their own culture, and it's really cool. Um, so the CIA World Fact Book, which I've been told doesn't even exist anymore, is going downhill, or who knows what's going on with all the federal cuts and stuff. But anyways, they used to have this thing where you could compare countries to US states, and that's a way that I like to be able to kind of gain an insight into the size of places. So Guatemala is slightly smaller than Pennsylvania. Um, I wish that they could compare it to Colorado because I have a feeling that Pennsylvania and Colorado are a similar size, but I don't know that for a fact. Um, Culture shock is definitely a thing, and this graphic that I like to use is more in the lens of a kind of a study abroad. We just had somebody actually from Gunnison who was able to spend like 9 weeks down in Guatemala. So I would imagine that this was the experience more for her. For 2 weeks, you may have a little bit of these stages as far as like everybody's going to have a honeymoon. And then there might be some crisis as far as something that might happen that'll be difficult to kind of adjust into. But once you're able to do that, like many of our kind of teachable moments with our students and with ourselves, it definitely makes you into a, you know, that's how we're growing, right? Speaking of which, I do like to use Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. I'm sure many of you, all the way back from like teaching school, you might remember, or you might use it in your classroom. Or I just like the idea of this, the risk zone, as far as taking risks, is where you're going to be able to grow the most. And so for me, that's also one of my um, reasons why I like Antigua, because in Antigua, which is where the program is based out of, there's an opportunity for all, well, for especially the comfort zone and the risk zone. There's definitely some things that would go into the danger zone, both personally, safety wise, that we'll go over. But I like the idea of being able to have some of those comforts that you might be used to, like whether that be like a coffee shop, a bar, more American themed food, different things like that. Where if you find yourself going where you're super uncomfortable with the culture and going into kind of the danger zone, you can always just go get a coffee or go get a beer or whatever the case may be, which isn't always the case in many of the towns in Guatemala where like the bar scene isn't really that much of a thing in the typical Guatemalan town slash city. So just keep that in mind, not only for Spanish, but just with, learning about the culture. I did want to make sure that we're all aware that when you are at a meal with your host family, that is one of the kind of boundaries that we try to set as far as attempting to speak Spanish. And if that, means that you're speaking bilingually, maybe somebody at the table has stronger skills than others and is doing some translation, kind of like when we were in the intros, that's fine. But more of anything, it's just out of respect for the host family, for the host Guatemalan family, to be able to make sure that they're a part of the conversation, because most of the time we have asked them to actually sit down at the table for the meals with you guys, especially for dinner, in order to be able to make it so you can have some safe opportunities to practice your Spanish. And so that is one thing that we do ask that, obviously with kids, it's a little bit more difficult away from the dinner table, but to be able to give the kids a heads up too, to really try your best to speak Spanish when you're sitting and breaking bread with your host family. Um, Safety and health. Our goal, as always, is that not only are we going to grow linguistically, culturally, incredible overall experience, fun, but like we talked about, as far as the culture shock that may happen. And then there is, traveler's diarrhea and other waterborne illnesses. Guatemala is a developing country, and so while there's definitely been some strides as far as the development versus even, when I first went in 1996, you still need to be careful as far as the water. The water is at your host family. There's going to be a big old jug of like a 5 gallon jug of water that will be prominently displayed probably near your kitchen area. So as you're kind of getting to know your house, that the host and whoever's there to be able to kind of introduce will kind of point that out. But that's why on the packing list it does have like a water bottle and Nalgene, which is kind of part of life, and at least in Durango, and I'm sure it is in Gunnison as well. But or I'm sorry, in Eagle and Gunnison. But just don't forget that as far as making sure that you're carrying around your water bottle, staying hydrated with filtered, purified water. So it used to be that they would actually go out and get like the bottled water. They have this thing now that's called EcoFiltro. And so it is more of a filter that they can use like tap water to be able to go through this like monster filter. And so EcoFiltro is also good. But if it's like when we go to El Hato, the elementary school, I believe that they might have an eco-filtro, but we do, we want people to just bring the water from their home when we're going to the Spanish school. I'm sorry, to the elementary school. Um, so just make sure that you are taking precaution. Um, oh yeah, that's the next one. So vaccinations. There are some there's nothing that is required except back during COVID. COVID was required, but I think they have relaxed that, so I don't think that COVID is required anymore. So I'm going to actually change that. Blanca no necesita la vacuna de COVID para entrar, ¿verdad? But routine vaccinations, hepatitis A and typhoid are highly recommended. For those of you that are going to TCall, you might want to talk to your doctor about malaria. The mosquito situation, and Ali, Sam, and Lisa can probably speak to this too, but it's not that bad in Antigua. Well, from what I've noticed, if you're very sensitive to, I mean, a lot of the windows don't have the screens on it, so my daughters like that they struggle with that at first. But there's not a ton of bugs, right, guys?
Can I speak to that?
Yeah.
So my first time there, I didn't have any kind of bug anything, and mosquitoes love me. I don't know what it is, but they love me. And so the last time I went to the outdoor gear shop and I found this like pop-up bug thing that you could put over your body. So I slept in a sleeping bag with that, and that helped a lot. And then this year, I'll send you all a picture. It's I feel very bougie with this. It's like a big giant pop-up mosquito thing that I'm going to sleep in. The mosquitoes aren't bad; they just love me. I also bought Sawyer's picaridin. It's not DEET, and they stayed away. I maybe got 2 bug bites the entire 2.5 weeks I was there.
Well, this is coming from somebody that we went up and did this other volcano that's not Pacaya, which is the one on the trip. It's Acatenango, which is one of the ones that you can see from town. And Fuego is the one that's constantly spewing out lava. And the place that we stayed at, it was like this kind of just very basic accommodation for like 15, 20 people in one place.
It was
There
like
was,
a shed.
yeah, it was a shed, but wasn't there a tarantula in there?
There was.
Yeah, there's a tarantula in there. So it's a good thing. I don't know about you, but I got the upper level bed, so I was very grateful that I got the upper level. So, but that's not on the volcano trip that we're going on. Allie and Sam, any comments on mosquitoes?
We did not see any tarantulas, if anyone is now feeling really worried. But we, I don't recall bug bites. Like we use picaridin bug spray, the same that Lisa mentioned. But I don't recall a notable number of bug bites from the last trip. Sam, do you remember anything notable?
No.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that there are a lot of street dogs in Antigua. And so one of my best friends, who was one of the first co-facilitators that we had, he's just like the type of person that will go up to any dog and start petting it. So if that is you, then you might want to think about getting rabies. Um, Otherwise, just make sure that you're not petting the street dogs. Even though they're very cute, I know it's hard, but just don't do it. Okay. The main thing I wanted to speak to on this slide is I've already mentioned that Guatemala is still considered a developing country. Um, it's kind of in the middle of the pack as far as developing countries, but it is in the same kind of range as countries like Nicaragua, Ghana, Morocco, and Iraq. And so hopefully that'll give you some context. But like I had already mentioned, a lot of the houses have open air where it's kind of cool. And I was actually just talking about this with the girls at dinner today, where they thought it was really cool how like the courtyard is kind of a major part of the house where people will hang out because Guatemala is called La Tierra de la Primavera or de la Primavera Eterna. So it's called like the land of the eternal spring. So it's always pretty good weather in especially Antigua. I think that's what they call Antigua. So, anyways, because of the fact that you're going to be spending a lot of time out in the courtyard and the way that they have those colonial architecture where there's kind of a nice center area that has a lot of nice stuff to do and to hang out and depending on where you're at. So just keep that in mind that there's open air, and so you have more kind of interaction with the outside. And if that's not for you, then just be careful about like closing your windows. Like most of the windows, you can close them, but a lot of times you can't necessarily like keep them open because there's a screen on it. And then with the plumbing side of it, just keep in mind that the plumbing I've been told is a little bit different than here, where the pipes are very narrow. And so, and unless you actually, I think the only place that I've seen that you were allowed to throw the toilet paper in the actual toilet was at the airport, at the Guatemala City airport. Um, Other than that, there should be a garbage can in there, and that is also for toilet paper. Around here, a lot of times it's for like feminine products and what they call flushable wipes, even though they're not supposed to be flushed anyways, typically. But in Guatemala, it's also for toilet paper. So just try to get in the habit of it as far as getting it, throwing that toilet paper in the toilet. Okay. Um, Typically, the water in Antigua restaurants is fairly safe. Like they've done the drill with tourists a lot of the time and a lot of the places that we will be going. The only thing that I would say where it might not be that way is typically we'll stop to get a snack on the way home from the lake. And so in places like that, if you get a meal, then with the salad, you might not want to get something that has salad because a lot of times they'll like wash the salad with sink water. So different people have different theories as far as staying healthy in that way, but some people just like flat out don't do any types of um, fruits and vegetables that don't have thick skins. Or make sure that it's in a place where you know that they're washing it with safe water and not sink water. So just keep that in mind. Also, ice. Unless you're like my youngest Talise, she loves her ice. But other than that, when in doubt, it's good to just get your stuff with no ice. But sometimes it's nice to have ice. I know, guys. So usually in Antigua, they'll keep that in mind as far as making sure that the ice is also filtered. Um, Yeah, like many villages and towns throughout the entire world, and I would even say this is the same with most of the towns and villages in the United States. Like most of it's safe, and there's a couple pockets here and there where you just need to be careful and just use common sense. I know that, I lived in Denver for many years, and so Denver, there's definitely some parts of Denver that I wouldn't want to hang out past like 10 o'clock, you know. So the only instant where we did have a incident as far as theft goes is we had a participant. This was probably 8 years ago who really wanted to go out for a jog by herself in like the early morning. And there's a really great spot to go for a jog where it's kind of off the beaten path and there's a lot of nature and it's really pretty. But she like had some jewelry on and she got out her iPhone to like take a photo of something. And so that's when we did have an incident. So just make sure that if you are going to be doing like morning or evening jogs or whatever the case may be, that you're either like doing a buddy system or not wearing jewelry or like showing off your iPhone. So a lot of it's common sense. If you are going to be out later at night, that's fine, but just make sure that you are. A lot of times, the tuk-tuk is the best way to go. You do have to pay a little bit to be able to do those tuk-tuks, and it's kind of fun. But you do have to pay for that. So if it's late at night, it's even if it's only like maybe 5 or 6 blocks, it's a good idea to take a tuk-tuk. So we'll also kind of once we get there, go over like what is the going price for various excursions on the tuk-tuk within Antigua and stuff like that. So yeah, just common sense as far as the safety thing. Um, Lisa, did I see that you put a comment in there?
Oh yeah, people were just asking me about the
Oh,
bug stuff,
the bug spray.
so
Yeah,
I put a link to it. That's all.
nice, cool. Okay, as far as money goes, it is always a good idea. I learned this when I was traveling for my sabbatical in South Africa. And then we went to Angola and the ATM was broken in the international airport. That's not going to happen in Guatemala. But it's always good to have a little bit changed over, even though depending on what bank you go to, you might need to do that in advance, or they might not be able to do it for you. So you might need to go to a different bank. So it's good to be able to have a little bit of cash in quetzales is the name of the currency. But it's not a requirement. And nowadays, it is almost certain that a lot of places do take credit cards. So that's where you do need to make sure that you are reaching out to your bank and letting them know that you will be traveling and giving them the days of your travels in order to be able to make sure that they don't think that it is fraud for when you start using your credit card if you do. So just make sure that you are letting them know, and then also at that time they can tell you what the fees are for ATM withdrawals as well as for using your credit card if it ever comes down to that. I can say for a fact that the only time that food wise that you're going to need to provide for your own is on Sundays, with the exception of the first day that we're there. So the families, they're amazing. It's very standard throughout Guatemala that Sunday is not a day that they cook. So that's kind of their day off. So that is the only time that you will not be able to have food. That we will also be kind of providing some recommendations as far as where you can go for a more of an authentic Guatemala dining experience, as well as that's also when we're going to be at the lake anyways. So we will kind of go through that as far as once we get to our lake group. Um, but yeah, we will on our orientation tour. This is a picture of Parque Central, which is right in the like most colonial Spanish village towns. It's an 8x8 grid. It's very simple as far as like First Avenue and First Street. We'll go over a lot of this stuff as far as the orientation tour that we do on the very first day of the experience, to kind of get you guys oriented. And also, there's a couple of different ATM slash banks where you can either get some money at the ATM or bring some cash if you'd like to bring like American cash and just put it on like a money belt and then you can exchange it that way. Depending on what the fee is from your bank, you'll probably get the best rate if you do that. But then you're carrying a bunch of American cash. So that's the
Rachel,
problem with that.
Rachel put in
And
the
I,
Rachel put in the chat if you have a suggestion for about how much cash per person somebody might need to bring.
yeah, we're both curious.
I think
Um,
that depends, Rachel. I think that it really depends on like there's a lot of people like often there's people that want to be able to like shop for their Christmas list for the next year. And that's really I would say as far as like the money side of it, the three meals on Sunday, and then depending on each of the specific excursion comes with some meals, but not all. So that kind of depends on what. But I would say that per person, I would say cheaper than the U.S. food wise for when you're going to the restaurant. I bet you can probably get away with like maybe $10 for dinner and maybe six for lunch and five for breakfast, something like that. Um, and then it kind of depends on what you'd like to get while you're there. So, for example, as many of you know, the weaving there is just unreal, just incredible. And a lot of the various woven goods, like they spend very long amounts of time to be able to put these masterpieces together. And so they will be like, depending on what you'd like to buy, like they'll be in the neighborhood of maybe even a couple $100. I got like a king size mattress cover that was made up of like it was kind of like a quilt of like old huipiles, which is like the woven women's covering. And so when I got that, I want to say it was like 100 $150. But other than that, a lot of the stuff is very reasonable. And so it is one of those things. When we go on the orientation tour, we'll also kind of get into um, where the market is, where to be able to get what items in the market. My daughters always get their Crocs in Guatemala because they have like these Crocs that obviously aren't like name brand Crocs, but you can get them for like $4. But Talise is kind of becoming like a little bit of a crock snob because she got these crock charms that now she wants to be able to put in there. And so I don't think that the ones in Guatemala have the holes for the crock charms. But anyways, she can deal with it, right? So they also have basically like knockoff of everything at the market. So it's not just about like obviously the fresh fruit is awesome, but there's also like a whole section that's like an actual mall where you can just like, and that's a wonderful thing to be able to do with your Spanish teacher, to be able to say like, hey, I want to learn about fruits and vegetables, or I want to learn about como negociar, like how to negotiate. And so it's always great to be able to have a local Guatemalan when you are going into the market so that, they don't give you the gringo price. So yeah, I guess to answer that question, I say it depends. So sorry that it's kind of a cop out answer.
Can I take 30 seconds to
Yeah.
speak to that? So, the first day we're taking our tour together, we're going to see where an ATM is, and as we're in a group, that's a really safe place to either there's a little bank or there's an ATM, so you can exchange cash, but you need your passport for that. Make sure you have your passport. There's also an ATM, but then the other thing I utilized was during our Spanish classes, there is an ATM in the hotel right behind the Spanish school. So if you find that you are needing more cash and want to go to an ATM, you can go there with your Spanish teacher. So it's not just you walking solo to an ATM. I always recommend going in groups of 2 to an ATM or more.
Totally. I did mention that the packing list is in the share folder. So without going through piece by piece, because I just did get the 10-minute warning, I am definitely willing to stick around for the next time as well, but I do want to respect people's time. Um, and gifts. So, we like to be able to, and it's kind of customary with this sort of thing, to be able to bring a small trinket, if you will, from that represents your home, whether that be something that represents Colorado or Eagle or Gunnison, Durango, whatever the case may be, something that you're passionate about, whether that be birds, or in my case, the Denver Broncos, to be able to kind of offer as a gift for your homestay family mother as well as your Spanish instructor. So, in the interest of being able to save space on your packing, hopefully it's smaller. But that is definitely something that we would encourage you to do. There is a tip built into the tuition for your Spanish instructor. So on the last day of the Spanish classes, we will have a envelope that is open that has, I think it's like 100 quetzales in it. And then if you want to put additional in there, we don't seal it or anything, and then you give them the envelope. So, but it's kind of nice to be able to just have something that represents you as well, just as a, something to remember you by. Um, Other FAQs, and then we'll kind of open it up for a couple questions. Like I said, I'll stick around as long as we need. First of all, time-wise, currently we are the same time as Guatemala in Colorado. They do not do daylight savings time, so I'm a little bit jealous because I wish we didn't have to either. So some of the time they're a little bit ahead. They're 1 hour ahead of us. So not Phoenix, it's the other way besides Phoenix, because Phoenix is also sometimes the same as us. Um, let's see here. Yeah, that homestay living situation is out of date. We have had that at some point where people are, but we pretty much, with the exception of Hilda's house, and then we will send that update as far as, I think it was Janine that we need to get in there. Okay, other than that, guys, I already mentioned that there is the Sunday no meals. However, they're also humanistic as far as knowing that after a long travel, they'll offer you a sandwich, a light, something light when you arrive on Sunday. So don't feel like you're going to be all of a sudden you're not going to get any dinner on Sunday if depending on when you're arriving. Um, by the way, thank you to everybody for getting in your flight information. I think we're all squared away as far as that goes.
Um, can I pop in there?
Sure.
Just real fast. Thanks to everybody for being patient with me, texting you. I have everybody's arrival information confirmed. I'm going to be following up with your departure information just to make sure I have that for Luis. So expect that. And if you have not filled out the registration number 2 form, please do that so we know if you have any food restrictions or animal allergies. I see Allie pointing. But yeah, that was it. Okay, thanks.
Cool. And I do have, as long as you did the registration part 2, and Lisa, I think that you're on this spreadsheet that has the registration part 2, but I think they do have their departure back to the US there.
Not
all of them?
everybody. Not
Okay,
everybody.
gotcha.
Okay.
Cool. And at this time, I think we do have a little bit of time for questions. So is there any kind of burning questions you guys have at this point? I know it's a lot. So thank you very much for going through this. I did want to introduce Luis. Ahora tenemos Luis que está con nosotros. Y Luis, si por favor, si puede decir un poco sobre ti, por ejemplo, por cuántos años ha hecho piloto y tu familia, tu esposa, y a dónde vive, ese tipo de cosas, que le gusta ver los Estados Unidos ganando sobre los Chapines en fútbol, este tipo de cosas, por favor. No podemos oírte. Todavía no.
Luis, esta vez Maika va a manejar cada día, ¿está bien? Maika está
No,
lista para
él
hacer.
necesita haz clic en su, ¿cómo se dice? Micrófono.
Encienda el micrófono, Luis.
Yo pienso que Luis tiene silenciado el micrófono.
Oh, no funciona.
Pienso que él necesita activar el micrófono.
Porque yo tengo un botón que dice pregunta para activar su micrófono y yo
¿Tú
presioné.
puedes?
Sí,
¿Tú
yo
puedes?
hice. Sí,
Ok.
lo
Tú puedes
hice.
activar el micrófono de Luis. Bueno.
Yo puedo preguntarlo.
Bueno. Pero yo pienso que, porque me pasó a mí también, que yo olvidé activar el micrófono.
Oh, ahora sí. No, antes.
Sí necesita activar el micrófono.
Tal vez la próxima vez
Sí.
cuando está. Oh, ahora sí.
Hola Steve, ¿cómo estás?
Bien. Gracias a Dios. ¿Y
Estoy
tú?
viendo, bien, estoy viendo a Lisa, ay Dios, no sé cómo se me olvida. ¿Cómo
Ale.
están? Ali, ¿sí?
Sí.
Ahora las otras chicas no las conozco, pero aquí en el grupo son bienvenidas.
No soy yo que Maika va a manejar cada día. Está listo de manejar.
¿Perdón?
No. Él tiene una broma. No es importante.
¿Recuerdas nuestro hijo Maika?
Sí, recuerdo, claro. Sí.
Dije que él va a manejar, pero no es broma.
Perfecto. Si él maneja, yo descanso, no hay problema.
Exactamente.